My name is Nutabi Camargo, and I am a researcher at Charité in neuroscience. I'm presenting today with Anna Schwerk. She's also a researcher in neuroscience, and we don't work with ibogaine ourselves, but we both have the same interest on it. And indeed, I'll start maybe by saying how we got to present this together. So there is a course in drug addiction at the university, and I was presenting something. She was invited to present the ibogaine as a treatment for drug addiction, and she told me, why don't we do it together? And I thought, well, it's very nice, but I don't know anything about ibogaine, so I started reading. I had quite some time to prepare the whole thing. And something that it's a little bit funny, it's that I remember that I met a guy when I was studying biology, a guy from Congo, and he was telling me about the use of ibogaine in the tribe where he belongs to. So he was a very talented biologist, not linked to any kind of drug or anything, but he told me that in his tribe, when they are like around 16, 17 years old, they all go through a ritual which is kind of a welcoming to the adult world, and it's with ibogaine. So it's kind of a 2-3 days ritual, of course with shamans and other people from the tribe that accompanies them. And the main thing that I remember from that is that he said you meet your ancestors. So he described you go to 5 generations back, and they explain you why you are here and which is your link with other people in the tribe, and many things, many questions that you need to know to be able to survive, probably, to grow and to interact with everybody. So it was funny to remember this thing by needing to present about ibogaine, so I found it even more interesting to do it. So we call it Ibogaine Revisited. We are not going to give the same kind of talk we gave for this drug addiction course, but a little bit an overview on the ibogaine as a molecule and how it has been inserted in the Western world. And of course, at the end, the idea will be to have some discussion about what people think about it. So ibogaine, it's classified as an indole alkaloid. It's found in these plants, the Tabernante, Iboga, and Boacanda, Africa, maybe in some others, but mainly in West Africa. And if you see this, so this is the formula, the indole alkaloids are indeed quite active molecules. It's a similar molecule than the psilocybin and also the one active in ayahuasca. And it's also quite similar to the serotonin formule. So some people attribute this, the shape of this molecule to the hallucinogen effect that the ibogaine and these other drugs have, even though they are all a little bit different. But it may be by the serotonin pathway that they give the visions. So as I said before, it's used in the Bwiti religion, and they shoot these preparations overnight, so rituals, and this is kind of a normal initiation. Everybody goes through this. We are going to present here another use in the same kind of tribe, and this is more treating a person, so it's a woman that had some psychological issues, and she receives a treatment of ibogaine to get rid of all these bad spirits that probably she had on. So I will, maybe we turn off the lights so the video will be a little bit nicer. Mm-hmm.
Guérisseur traditionnel du Gabon. Dans ma famille, mon grand-père est initié. Moi, j'ai été initié à l'âge de 7 ans dans ma famille. Et donc, j'ai grandi dans cette tradition qui m'a permis d'apprendre tout ce que je sais aujourd'hui. Ça, c'est la racine du Bouddha. Et là, c'est un échantillon que j'ai déraciné toujours montrer aux gens à partir du moment où ils ont besoin donc, nous, par exemple, dans l'iboga, on n'utilise pas tout ça. On n'utilise ni le bois, on n'utilise ni cette première peau. On râpe la première écorce de la racine n'est pas mangeable. Donc on ne la consomme pas, la première écorce. Mais c'est la deuxième écorce. Donc à partir du moment où tu vas râper la deuxième écorce, tu verras apparaître à peine le bois. Et donc c'est cette deuxième écorce qui se consomme et qui a des vertus thérapeutiques pour l'initiation à l'iboga. Le guérisseur qui travaille avec un patient doit d'abord le lire. À partir du moment où il lit le patient, il sait que telle personne a un problème là, 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 là. Et donc, quand il va travailler avec lui, bon, il sait que je dois travailler avec lui comme ça, comme ça, comme ça, parce que quelque part, lui, il a tel et tel problème. Il faudrait que ça s'adapte comme ça pour lui. Et c'est pour ça que le travail de l'iboga est bien ciblé et bien cadré, selon les personnes, comme je disais tout à l'heure. C'est-à-dire que chaque personne a un traitement bien défini pour soi. Pendant l'initiation, on te prend un miroir, on te le pose devant toi, on te maquille. À partir de ce moment-là, tu regardes dans le miroir. Donc, à partir de là, tu vas commencer à percevoir ta double personnalité. Donc, tu rentres dans le miroir, tu te traverses, puisque tu as toi en face de toi. Tu pénètres à l'intérieur de toi-même pour voir exactement qui tu es à l'intérieur de toi.
It's nice. Yeah, I think it's very powerful. And of course, in this case, it was, I guess, quite a strong problem that this woman has. But some of the beautiful thing is like dealing with the whole thing together. Sorry, oops. My cat is awake. Okay. So going on time, of course, well, what they say is that in the Bwiti religion, they have been using this for 3,000 years at least. Difficult to know. And what I wanted to introduce a little bit, it's a little bit the timeline since this was kind of discovered by people from Europe and how this evolved in our society a little bit. So the first kind of written report about the iboga was in 1864, so by French and Belgian explorers, and they describe it as a stimulant and an aphrodisiac that was used by people in Gabon and Congo. Some of the roots were brought to France, and they did this botanical description, so put it in the list of organisms. And in 1903, there was another report, but then a little bit more describing it as a visionary plant. In the period from the 40s to the 66, there were like different uses for this. This was kind of made into a pharmaceutical pill, and it was used in Congo, but also in France, mainly against fatigue, so in quite small doses. Then some of the reports of use of it, not only for experimentation of a new molecule, but also to treat some patients, come from the psychiatrist Claudio Naranjo. We are going to present a little bit of his work at the end as well, because it's quite interesting. In 57, there was also, it was patented as an enhancer of opioid analgesic effect. And then there comes this reference from Howard Lotsof. So he's quite well known. He discovered this, we are going to present also his video, accidentally, and found out that it has indeed quite a strong potential as an anti-addictive drug. After that, the drug, as many other, was placed under the DACA control. So this list of drugs that were under amendments and were kind of criminalized. The possession then became banned in the United States. It was patented as a treatment for heroin addiction. And finally, it was added to a list of doping substances and banned also by the Olympic Committee. So we go again to a video. I think also this is quite nice. It's the experience of Howard Lotsof. With the ball turning is quite nice.
I was having breakfast with a friend of mine who was a chemist, and he was going through a freezer he had, and the freezer was full of different types of drugs. He pulled out a small vial and said, "I think you'll be interested in this." I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "Well, it's an African hallucinogen, and it lasts 36 hours. So here I am under the influence of this very powerful hallucinogen, and I get home and I lay down, and the ibogaine is working and working and working and working, and it's 33 hours later, and I only thought to myself, I'm exhausted, I'm going to sleep for a week, and I'm never going to take this drug again. And I got dressed and I walked out of the house, and that's when I realized that I was not in narcotic withdrawal. And I looked at this large tree in front of me, and I looked at the clouds in the sky, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I was not frightened. and perceived that my entire life had been full of fear.
Somewhere, I think it was the end of 1988 or early 89, I believe, I received a call from Mr. Howard Lotzoff, who was living in Staten Island in New York City, and he claimed he had a cure for drug addiction. And he explained that somewhere in the late 60s he took this bizarre drug called ibogaine, and after that experience he had lost his cravings for drugs, and prior to that time he had been a multi-drug user. At the time I received this call, I really didn't think very much of it. I get numerous calls from people who claim they have a cure for something or other and they want me to study it. And most of these people, I think, are really not in touch with the reality, and I assume Mr. Lotzoff was of a similar nature, and I dismissed the call, really. He called back several times, and the more I talked to him, the more intrigued I became, and I was particularly intrigued by the fact that he claimed that you took this drug once and you lost your cravings for drugs at least for several months or forever. And this sort of magic bullet notion is really unlike any pharmaceutical we have really for any disease.
Good evening, I'm Forrest Sawyer, and this is Day One. What if we could cure drug addiction with a single pill? I'm thinking. I don't have any cravings for cocaine. But the cure itself makes you high. And government researchers wondered if it really cures anything at all. Ibogaine is a psychedelic drug that puts its users on a 3-day trip. It's illegal in the U.S., and no one knows if it really works.
It took me from 1984 to 1991 through the leadership of 3 different directors of the National Institute on Drug Abuse to finally get them to take a serious look at ibogaine. Now, imagine that you are a doctor. You spend 12 years getting your education. You spend 15 years in the field becoming an expert. And then the last thing you're going to want to hear is some former heroin addict went and discovered the effective medication that you're looking for. So there was enormous resistance.
Okay, so this was his experience. It's a little bit in parallel with the one of Claudio Naranjo in a kind of complete different setup. But of course, he was really into it because, as he explained, he was addicted and just one take, and then he could not even have withdrawal or the need to take anything. So he started a few initiatives. So starting by trying to contact the clinicians and see what could be done. And he did by himself some kind of trial. So he proposed it to his friends. And the first test, it was in 63 with 20 individuals, including himself. So he used 19 milligrams per kilogram. It lasted 30 hours, as he explained it. And in this group, there were 7 heroin addicted, and 6 of them abstained after a single use for at least 6 months. And all reported absence of craving and withdrawal symptoms. So this is also reported. Some people take it once and then it's over. Some people have to take it again. It depends a lot also on the real motivation of the person and things like that. Nothing is really kind of magic, but it can really be radical. In 82, he created a foundation to legitimize the ibogaine, and then in 86 he created this company called NDA, which wanted to support research, so by collecting and giving money, and a few studies were done in Rotterdam and New York in animal models for opioid addiction and were published. So even though there were all these efforts, it was never really legitimized. There have been other human trials on this. So in this case, for example, this first one is 40 people in the Netherlands. So this is in non-medical settings, but probably the same that what Lotzoff did. In 94, the NDA supported preclinical toxicology research in human trials, and there is this woman, Deborah Mash, who has done a lot. She was conducting this study. In 1995, it was approved by the FDA. So she had the permission to do it in cocaine-dependent subjects in Miami. However, before starting, it was abandoned because the fundings were cut. In 2001, I think this is one of the only kind of big study that was done. It was 150 people. I think it was also by Deborah Mash. And she assigned, these different doses. And the outcome, it's here. So there were no significant adverse events seen in these studies. There was nausea and mild tremor. Ataxia, I guess the same that we see on the woman that takes it in the tribe. And then some things like hypotensive response to ibogaine observed in some cocaine-dependent subjects and required some monitoring. So in the context of drug addiction, I wanted to introduce a little bit the pathway of reward, so what is affected in drug addiction in the brain. And it's indeed like the very simple way we live and we do stuff. So we have a need that can be eating, drinking, having fun, or just having some kind of inspiration. This gives us a motivation, we do something, and then we get a reward. So this is the base of any behavior people have. This is kind of well localized in the brain. So, we cannot see the drawing that well, but in principle it has been described which are the areas of the brain which are involved. So you have the amygdala, which have all this emotional connotation. The prefrontal cortex is a really important part. It's for all what it's inhibition and decision making, and different system of neurotransmitters that will play together to make us do this elaborated behavior. And if we zoom in, it's not just a neuron coming in and one coming out, but it's quite a complex system. So it's a network of cells. And what you have here, it's an example. So you will have this in the nucleus accumbens, let's say one of the nucleus there, and you have one neuron that comes and brings some kind of information. When this gets there, there are a lot of little other neurons modulating this to make a refined response. So for example, in this area, we have opioid neurons. So these are neurons that secrete opioids and activate opioid receptors. There is dopamine, there are cannabinoids. This is acetylcholine, so for the nicotine receptor activation. And if we zoom in this area, so this is synapse. I'm sorry, maybe I treat you like you don't know much about it, but no. Okay, this is synapse. And what happens here, it's like, okay, this is the part where there's the connection between a neuron coming and the one over there. One, it's releasing these neurotransmitters and activating the receptors on the other side. And this is, of course, at the base of all the brain functioning. And one of the important things about it is that when this is repeated many times, then it will be potentiated. So the shape of the synapse change, the molecular composition of the synapse change, and it's at the base of memory, learning, also of drug addiction, and of neurological diseases when this system is not functioning. So for example, for drug addiction, what is happening, we are adding opioids directly to the synapse, but it's not integrated in the whole physiological thing. So this will completely change the balance of the synapses. And that's why drug addiction is also considered as a disease, because it will have kind of a molecular correlate where everything that should be working in a way, it's not working in that way anymore. And this is important to understand, maybe to try to see how the ibogaine will bring back this system to a balance level. So I will now pass the word to Anna, who will explain a little bit the effects of ibogaine in these receptors.
Yes, and especially on the brain. And it actually drove most research in the last decennia quite crazy because it works on all different transmitter systems, which makes it really hard to pinpoint one mechanism that actually is responsible for all the anti-addictive effects ibogaine has. So one important interaction is the serotonergic interaction. As you can see, the molecule of ibogaine resembles the serotonin molecule quite a lot, and that's also why it can bind to the same receptor. And it also brings, probably through this interaction with a transporter there, an antidepressive effect. And it can also stimulate hallucinogenic effects at the 5-HT2A receptor. It works as well on the dopaminergic system, adrenergic, cholinergic, opiate, glutamatergic, and on the sigma-2 receptor, which is very unique in the brain. and is responsible for many neurological diseases and has also been implicated in the release and synthesis of dopamine, but is also responsible for the neurotoxic effects of ibogaine. And probably the most important effect of ibogaine is its interaction with the opioid receptor system. So it works as well on the kappa as on the mu opioid receptor, and the former is implicated as well in reducing stimulant addiction and also in synaptic dopamine. And the latter, the mu opioid system, you can see here. So normally you can see here the morphine molecules or endogenous opioids can bind to the mu receptor here, which would decrease the release of GABA, which normally inhibits dopamine. And that would lead to a net increase in dopamine in the striatum, which brings about the rewarding effects of opiates. So ibogaine does almost the same. It docks to this receptor, but it does not increase dopamine in the striatum, which means there's no rewarding effects, but you have no withdrawal basically and no craving, which Nutabi already reported, and which is very unique to ibogaine. And another very important effect is this inhibition of the MK801 binding site in glutamatergic receptors, which has been implicated in preventing the long-term adaptations caused by opioids, stimulants, and alcohol. And the antagonism at the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, the alpha-3 beta-4 unit, which has been involved in nicotine and alcohol addiction. So you can see it works on almost any addiction system in the brain. And yeah, it makes it quite unique here. And this has been also tested in several animal models. And I know they only mimic the human condition, and they're quite disputable. So they can never really cover a whole complex syndrome as addiction, but they try to by isolating certain factors of addiction, like here in the operant self-administration. The animal basically learns to self-administer drugs, conditioned to cues and tones. And then this is also employed in the extinction reinstatement paradigm, where you test for relapse. So you first let an animal learn the self-administration, then you extinct the behavior, then you can inject certain compounds to prevent relapse. Or you have the condition-based preference, actually showing the preference of an animal for a drug, where you condition drug intake to a certain context, and then afterwards you can see whether the rat likes it or not. And all these different paradigms have been proven effective for ibogaine administration. So as you can see, it worked on morphine in terms of reducing withdrawal, tolerance, and self-administration. It reduced place preference for amphetamine and cocaine, and also self-administration. The same for alcohol, seeking, and self-administration, and also for dopaminergic responses of nicotine, which basically are all drugs involved here. So now you are again.
So one of the things we wanted to pinpoint is that even though there is this big potential, we try to find out like most of the articles that have been published about it, and you have here from late 50s to 2013, 2040 articles. It seems quite some, but it's really not a lot for a molecule that may have such a big potential. And what you can see is that there was, of course, a wave of publications before 2000, then this went down a little bit, and there have been a few other trials, mainly on animals. And of course, then comes a little bit the question of why is this? Why, if there is people and researchers interested on developing something with the ibogaine, there has not been fundings and there is no support? One of the reasons it's probably the legal status, or what it said before. Are we treating a drug addiction with something that makes you already quite high? So this is the legal status today.
And it's mostly, it's banned only in the States and in Sweden and in Australia, but not scheduled in most of the countries, as you can see, except for Denmark, Poland, and Belgium, and France, and Switzerland, and Europe, and only accepted as a treatment in Mexico, Gabon, Cameroon, Congo, and in the rest of Africa, more or less. So not many countries. But there's also clinics in Canada and in the States.
Yeah, so somehow it's Schedule 1 in the States, but we found also that there are a few clinics there where one can get a treatment for drug addiction or just kind of a therapy from it. And so one of the points that also has been brought about it is that there were some accidents while treating people with ibogaine. And I think one of the first ones was in France in 1989. So it was a woman, 44 years old. She used 8 milligrams, so this is not particularly a big dose, and died after 4 hours of administration. And what they found out is that she had a history of cardiovascular disorders. Another example was this woman. She was 24, and she was treated for drug addiction in the Netherlands, so she got quite a high dose. And I think she died something like 10 hours after getting it. And one of the things they say is that she probably took heroin while she was in ibogaine. But this is all not kind of completely documented. So one of the things that has been done is to really try to bring it as a strong therapy. It's not something that people can do banally in their house or something like that, but probably have somebody that can really take care of them, and especially to have a medical history report. So some of the important points will be there.
Yeah, and especially no cardiovascular diseases and no severe medical conditions. And sometimes you don't know. You don't know if you have a slight heart alteration. So it's always good to be first in a clinical setting to get a monitoring of your heart rate and your respiration. And of course, no drug use while you're taking the drug. And that's actually what a lot of addicts seem to do shortly afterwards, or even while they're on the treatment, to take heroin again sometimes. And then, yeah, that's the lethal dose mostly.
Yeah. So to illustrate this a little bit, we also will show a video of a clinic in Canada of a girl that is receiving a treatment. Nice. It's not over yet.
Can you describe the withdrawal symptoms?
You get the bumpy skin and runny nose, runny eyes. Your skin starts to turn to fire. In general, horrible. What else?
So burning sensation?
Yeah, burning sensation all over the skin.
Okay.
Arms, especially, for some reason.
Any pain?
Pain everywhere.
Alright.
Hair in your eye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Psychiatric problems?
No.
Stroke?
No.
Thyroid?
No.
Tremors?
No.
Ulcers, colitis, or arthritis?
No.
Crohn's disease?
No.
Inflammatory bowel disease?
No.
Okay. And methadone is?
100.
Okay. And, and you don't have any food or drug allergies?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Sign it?
Yep. Do it.
Today is the 18th.
18th. Good day.
We're going to measure a 100 milligram test dose. Perfect. 100 milligrams of ibogaine hydrochloride. That's a test dose. As you can see, it's quite a bit. It's 3 big capsules. Can you pull your arm up a little? I'm gonna pull this right up.
Good God, girl.
Yeah. Good. Now, you're gonna do a tight squeeze. Relax your hand. It's hard. Yeah. Keep your pulses good though.
Maybe I will stop it before the
Under
end.
your tongue.
Oh, 10 minutes.
That's right. Now, this is your test dose. It's 100 milligrams of ibogaine hydrochloride.
I have to stop it
We'll give you
because
this
of
first,
Claudia Naranjo.
and we'll take your blood pressure, your pulse, and your temperature 3 times during the hour, and monitor you for any allergic reaction. If there's any major fluctuations in your blood pressure and your pulse, then we'll have to proceed with caution, or if there's any real contraindications, we'll have to stop. So you're aware of that, okay?
I'll stop it
This here's
because of the time. So, I mean, most of these videos are in the ICER site, or you can find easily. It was just to show a little bit how this can go. Of course, it's a private clinic, so everybody may have its own way of doing it. Yeah, there is also this way that it's used.
So it's used like this in microdoses actually for thousands of years in the Bwiti religion. But we have only recently discovered actually that it could be used as a self-therapy or like a intermediate therapy. You don't want to go for the full trip in order to heal addiction. And it's actually isolated from the root bark and contains a full range of all alkaloids found in ibogaine and is extracted into pure alcohol in the highest possible concentration, so 0.58 milligrams per drop. So when you take these every day for a month, you have also an accumulation of ibogaine in your body and you get stronger effects with time progressing. So it's very nice, but it affords a high level of motivation, sobriety, and introspection and collaboration for therapy, but might be a nice alternative.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then well, to finish, we will show the video again of Claudio Naranjo. So to bring it also to a different thing, that drug addiction, but what were his experiences in that moment. And we have got it a little bit. So he starts talking now when he was invited to the LSD convention in California in 1967, and then it goes. I mean, it's an interview, so he will tell some things about his own experience.
And he actually did these microdoses.
And I received this request through the telephone when I was in Chile, and I asked, could it be that I speak not of LSD, which is not what I have done more of, that is more original, but about ibogaine, which is what I am involved in right now. And this was accepted. So I was the only one in the LSD conference who talked about ibogaine. And since everybody was talking about the here and now, I talked about ibogaine and the there and then. And I probably have at home somewhere the headlines of the following day of the conference's first day. Ibogaine, the drug of the there and then, because of the possibility of re-elaborating, redigesting memories, traumatic episodes, and so on. I was my first subject. My experience was that I was in a borrowed house. I was in a season coming from America, like a holiday period in my time on a Guggenheim Fellowship, I think. Somebody lent me a beautiful house with birdsong and lawn, and not big like here, but small enclosed garden, many bougainvilleas, and at some point I felt like lying down, and after lying down I felt as if the whole world was turning around me, and it was like a cosmic dance, regularity of the orbits of all the celestial bodies. Of course I was eyes closed, but the sense was that there is a universal harmony, and I am at the center of everything. I'm not part of that dance. I'm holding on to myself, I'm holding on to something. And I have a sort of miserable life by not joining to this universal life. And part of me wants to be part of it, and part of me is afraid that if I turn the switch, so to say, if I say, let me be, let me let go and be part of everything in its wonderful intrinsic harmony. What if God wants me to be dust? What if I choose by that, through that, to be nobody? I was not ready to be nobody. I was too self-important. And it happened as if there was a timing to the process of decision, as if I had my fingers for too long on the switch. And it was not granted that I had this opportunity. It was too much of a delayed yes. And from then on, and this was very illustrative for me, from then on it was Mickey Mouse. It was cartoons. Trivial cartoons, boring cartoons. It's a world of entertainment. So there was no way to come back. It was like as if I had lost my chance when I'm not ready. It seemed to be still a lower world, more primeval than that of the ayahuasca animals. I distinctly saw that it was therapeutic for many people. Not always clear why, and this was similar to ayahuasca. Ayahuasca heals without going through understanding. It's as if it was a sort of lubricant of instinctual life. Everything becomes more natural. Well, I think we may define addiction as not only chemically related. Our ego is an addict, addicted to applause, addicted to comfort, addicted to distraction, addicted to reading, addicted to movies, addicted to all kinds of things. I think it's very true what Pascal said, that we have trouble in the world because we are all distracted. We are unable to stay quiet in our rooms. And we meddle with others, and we go out of ourselves compulsively in search for something that we're missing inside. So I think the key to that situation of needing less is finding oneself in some way, a greater sense of the core of one's being. People under Ibogaine didn't describe it as a mystery or coming into a mystical union. But I think it might have been decoded like that, like the experience of the blue light. Could have been spoken of as a blessing, as an energy representing the inner dimension. And I remember this sense of needing food or water or anything, needlessness, because I was so full of radiance and full of life. So I think it has to do with that, with find the inner treasure. And health. Our sense of lack that makes us always be in the pursuit of something and wanting to fill up the void.
Okay, we will stop it there because we have 10 minutes left and we still wanted to say a few more things. So, yeah. So this brings us a little bit to some of the questions that maybe had already been going around and that can bring some discussion. Unless you have your own questions, of course, they are also welcome. But one of the points is, of course, why is this lack of interest by the pharmaceutical and even the scientific governmental funds? Yeah, I think this has been discussed for many of these type of drugs, and it's maybe, yeah, we can go through it. Another point is, do we really need to know the mechanisms of this? If we have a plant that works and that has such a complex mechanism for many quite complicated subjects, do we really need to go through this? So if you ask me, I'll say, of course, this is my job. This is what I do every day. I look for mechanism of how the brain is working and how this stuff is doing that and that. But I think this is mainly my, or our passion. But for a matter like this, like, I don't know, what would people think about it? So you have a substance in the form of a plant, you take it, you have a whole trip, dreamy, you solve many problems, so why would we really need to know exactly how it works? And another point is like, would it be beneficial for everyone to experiment something like that? And what makes us come to this, it's in this Bwiti religion. For them, this seems to be kind of a normal step on getting adult, something you have to go through to understand things in life. And of course, we don't promote anything. Everybody does what they want. But we want to invite somebody that tried it and will tell a little bit his experience with it. Duko. And if anybody wants to say anything after, of course. Yes?
I just wanted to offer a little context to what you were saying, if you're open to it, regarding the first question in particular and the role of Deborah Mash.
Can I do my thing first and then you
I'm
go
sorry,
on?
I thought she was asking for questions. My apologies.
Oh,
No.
yeah, it was maybe
I just wanted
confusing.
to share my experiment of meeting the Iboga. I was always, let's say, very curious or looking for the meaning or whatever behind life, and I did it through, let's say, mushrooms, ayahuasca, and a lot of ceremonies. And I saw medicine world somewhere, and they said the medicine who is above, you cannot say above, but it was really interesting also to go back in your ancestors and family story, because I had a kind of a strange story, but who hasn't? Anyway, I wanted to take the Iboga, and the only way for me to find the Iboga in my surroundings at that time around Amsterdam, I was going to a rehab center, but an underground rehab center, and there I made arrangements to come back the next week, and I could take a very high dose of their extract, Iboga extract. I went there, I did, let's say, a fast, but I was also young and eager, and I took a way too high dose. I was there like 84 hours in a huge fight, puking, and the people who had to take care of me, they left. Everybody was scared, I don't know, it was really a strong experience. But this is something I think I was looking for in a way. 9 years later, it took me 9 years to kind of put a grasp on myself. 9 years later, I met people who did it in a ceremonial setting, and then I did the whole ceremony with them. And this was done by initiated people, so they first brought me to surrender and to death or brain death or whatever you stop thinking, kind of. And then I found out that I was not taking the Iboga, but I was fighting it. I was trying to fight this whole thing. The second time I came back in this fear, and then I couldn't relax, and also the the second time was also they give you the iboga in a slow way and you're adept. And when you have enough, you vomit. The first time I had way too much, and I could only vomit and fight actually. And then that was not a nice experience. But the second time I mellowed down, and then a year later I did another experience, another ceremony. And the first time, the first night you surrender. The next day you come in a kind of a state of silence, and yeah, you can you have a vision. And this was a part I should have known the first time, is you dance to life. So whatever you have encountered and learned, you take with you and bring it into practice. So I share this experience just with you, that if you ever come across a medicine like this, just take care. And I know everybody knows this, but I still wanted to share my experience about iboga. And I must say, after 14 years being with this medicine, it hasn't been the only one, but I also had to think of what to say here. I still feel it's around me, and it really grounded me and took a lot of fear and anger away. I feel very good after it, but I hope you all, if ever come across, have a softer way.
Question.
In relation to the first question that you asked, are you proposing this as a rhetorical question, or do you have a specific answer to it? Because the reason I bring it up is I personally have had a lot of experience with the ibogaine world and with the history behind it. I'm one of the few people that have actually interviewed Lotsovs, Deborah Mash, Dana Beal, many of the key players. And I think it's important for people to understand that the reason there's no interest in pharmaceutical investment is because it was successful. What people don't understand is that Deborah Mash tried to bankrupt Howard and Norma Lotsov and take the patent away from them and sell it, a version of it, to the pharmaceutical companies. They were only willing to bankroll development of the drug if they could isolate the mechanism, what she called noribogaine metabolite, and get rid of the psycho-spiritual experience altogether. And because they couldn't come up with that, they ended up blaming it all on Howard. They claimed that Howard didn't have the funding for it. And basically the addiction treatment lobby, right, had so much power that they said, we don't want a cure. And so this is really kind of what we're running up against when we're looking at the for-profit industry and what psychedelic research is looking at. So here you are coming up with an actual drug that can save millions of people's lives, but because it doesn't create a chronic condition, they won't fund it. And I think that's an important factor to at least touch on when we're talking about this specific thing.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, with all this, I thought it was kind of evident maybe to think of different answers of it, but it's, of course, an important point that I think most people that like this entheo thing thinks about, like there is this kind of resistance, and there are probably many reasons. This, that it cannot be really used to control, so the drug addiction, it's a very weird word to me, because like most of the cures are indeed addictive by themselves. You have to take this the whole life, and you also keep people outside of the society. So if you would have something that will bring people back to their motivation and to their normal life, this is not interesting, right? It's perhaps better to just keep people a little bit asleep and give them control the drug that they are taking.
It's just also important not to be naive about the potential for psychedelic therapy too, because we have the ability to prove the scientific theorem, but it doesn't mean that the marketplace will accept it or people will invest in it. And the interest we face as researchers and as policy people is entrenched interest. Yeah. So it's always important, in my personal experience, and I'm just offering this, is to make sure that gets entered into the dialogue, so people know the realistic, forces that they're up against when we're trying to advance these ideas. So thanks for listening to that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if we have time for more questions. Anybody wants to say anything? There's one more.
Can you tell us something more about few drops a day for cell therapy, microdoses.
Yeah, shall we go back to that? Yeah, so would you like to know? It's quite a recent discovery, or it's quite a recent product they made. So, as I said, they extract all the alkaloids from the root bark and put it into pure alcohol after extracting it. And then you can take it, they say you can start, actually one dose should be 1 drop, but you can take up to 3 drops, depending on how you feel. But I guess it's more like a more subtle treatment. Should be like more or less homeopathic, but as it accumulates, it becomes stronger. So it's good to do it when you're ready also to not do any caffeine, not do any drugs while you're doing this, and completely abstain from certain products and focus on yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
Gail's outcome.
Gail's outcome, I don't know.
No, they didn't show actually, no. No, not in the, yeah.
No, you have to look for
it. But as I said, like in this one treatment, they had 7 addicted people and 6 got out of it really well, so.
You wanted to ask one question.
Possible to cultivate this plant in Europe?
Yeah,
to cultivate it?
Not the plant itself, but I mean, you can cultivate almost every plant in a growing house if you know the conditions, and we know the conditions. And I know there's also some trials of growing them in small cultures, basically, and then just harvesting the alkaloids from it. So that could be a way of getting to the same results without actually having the plant or the root bark.
Which is, again, a point of discussion. Like, can you just extract part of it, or do you need to take the whole plant?
It's a full range of alkaloids, just in the medium of the culture, basically.
Okay.
It's a mini plant.
I have some doubts about the specificity of ibogaine for addictive problems, because addiction is, as you said, a complex compound with several symptoms. Withdrawal, you talk about withdrawal, you talk about craving, and I think you really have to differentiate between short-term effects of such a drug and long-term learning effects.
Yeah.
I would say that ibogaine is like many other psychedelic drugs. It's just a vector to open a psychological crisis or opening of and then each patient has to bring in what it is able to bring in to change its emotional coping.
Yeah.
And this is really something the drug will not do it for the patient. Every patient has to do this by his own. But ibogaine maybe is an opening of this process, but I really don't think that really you can, because the withdrawal symptoms normally they are done after several hours or several days.
Yeah.
If the patient Gail, she needs to be in the clinic for several days with methadone.
Yeah.
The main methadone withdrawal is after 3 to 5 days. So you cannot say much with just observing the cat several hours. So it's really important that you acknowledge that the drug is opening a window, but the patient has to bring in what is doing out of it.
Of course. I mean, this is, I think, even if you would take ibogaine without a drug addiction. So one of the points of it, it's like if you would see it as Claudio Naranjo is explaining it, even if you don't have a problem, you take it, you kind of face something that it's in yourself, it will be like a resetting. And then you get to this simple, needless way of thinking, and then you go back. And if you bring something and you integrate it in your life and it helps you, better for you, but it will not get rid. Also, I mean, drug addiction, it's such a complex thing. You have all the social pressure, you have the surroundings. So, yeah, you have to work on it, but it's already quite a big step to maybe bring it to zero, and then it depends on you to bring it over. Because, like, the other type, so if you wait that withdrawal is going on and this is all mixed with depression and emotional things, and it's kind of a possibility to maybe erase many of the bad things, and then certainly it doesn't work for everybody, that's for sure. You have to work on it after.
But you also restore some of the addictive systems, so it's quite unique, and it also increases certain growth factors in the brain and other structures for long term, and also the withdrawal symptoms are for 5 days or longer. So it has some long-term effects already proven. But I guess it's like Nutabi said, yeah, it's more introspective and changing the actual course of the disease, no?
Yeah, here.
Okay. 2 questions. You talk about an alkaloid complex in this tincture. So it's not just ibogaine, the single molecule, it's also other...
Yeah, but related compounds, yeah. Like you heard already, like ibogaine gets processed to nor-ibogaine, and then there's some more of these compounds, or several more.
have there been any test experiments to see what the different components in this mixture do by themselves?
Yeah, there's some, of course, and they looked a lot at specific ones, like they said the no-ibogaine has been a lot researched, or also certain congener forms have been a lot researched. They did that, but they don't show all the effects actually that ibogaine shows. Yeah.
Of course, but it's interesting to find out which parts of the effects are caused by which components of the mixture and how they interact.
True.
Okay, and the last one is how does this long-term microdose treatment actually, so what kind of effects does it have? What kind of effects have been observed?
I mean, there's no studies yet, so that's only
empirical evidence, yes, anecdotal, but
so empirically, if you take it over longer term, you can have even trippy effects or psychedelic effects, because depending on the dose you take, it accumulates and the effects become stronger. And I suppose it has all these receptor effects, but not so strong as you have with a normal dose. So you might have similar antagonisms and similar loss of cravings for a lot of substances, but I cannot tell because I haven't tried.
So like replace the 3 coffees a day with that, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's apparently quite effective for fatigue. And one of the points also, I was watching a guy, he was giving a talk about these microdoses, and he's giving this talk to all scientific community, and then he just say, yeah, I just took quite some drops before, and look at me, and then he does this thing, and I thought, okay, this is also dangerous, you know? When you have this little thing in your pocket, and then you will be taking the thing quite often to kind of push you up, as you would do with coffee or something else.
You say it accumulates. That's quite weird. Normally compounds degrade quite fast in the body. Why does this accumulate?
No ibogaine, for example, stays in your system for much longer. And as you saw, ibogaine itself is 36 hours of a trip.
And how long does neuroibogaine stay in your system for?
Good question. A bit longer than ibogaine, like 24, 48 hours longer. Yeah. So then in total you might 6 weeks even.
Yeah, I think that there are some studies that show, yeah, it can be, for example, stuck in adipose tissue and then release little by little. This is one way that it can last long in the body. Okay. So it's not just eliminated that fast.
I noticed a couple of themes in this gentleman whose name I didn't catch, and in Nadano's, and there's this theme of fear, loss of fear. Is this something you've seen over a whole slew of these researchers, this loss of fear when they're coming out of it? Does this seem to be a characteristic of ibogaine itself? If so, what do you think is going on there? And maybe as neurologists, do you think this is actually an interesting possibility, searching with the mechanisms of fear in the brain?
Yes, for sure. And I think it has, amongst others, to do with the serotonin receptor or transporter, because it talks to the same binding site as serotonin does. And could like this be also taken as an antidepressive treatment, and that's or also anti-anxiety treatment, because that's what they normally give to aggressive or anxious people too, no? SSRIs. So it might have to do with that, but as it's so complex and we're still discovering more mechanisms, it might be also many more. Yeah. But I guess it's one of the common things after psychedelic experience that you feel more connected and less fearful of the world. No?
Yeah. Maybe we are going to give the word to the next person, or we are a little bit over time. Thank you.
Thanks.